us through our recent financing. I also want to thank the fabulous staff that I've had the pleasure of working with for the better part of 100 days. There's a great group of people here in North America, as well as obviously in Europe. So a quick shout out to each of them. And there is a very impressive group of contractors and freelancers that have been working in and around HealthGauge and Tech to Heal for a number of years. So to them, thank you as well. It's been a real pleasure and an honor to work with you for the last 100 days. Folks, what I'd like to do tonight is really just update you on, what myself and the team that I just spoke of have gone through over the last 100 days. It's been an exciting time. There's been some ups, there's been some downs. We've gone left and we've gone right, but we've gotten to where we needed to get to. So I'm proud of the team from that perspective. So I'd like to share that with you today. I'm also going to give you a little bit of a glimpse of what I think the next 100 days, or that is what Q1 will look like. However, I am going to start January with a formal presentation so that you have full transparency on what we'll be going through in Q1, because that too is just as exciting as the last 100 days that we've walked through. So if you'll indulge me, I'll move us through a few slides. The agenda for this evening, pretty tight, but I'm looking forward to the Q&A at the end of it. We're going to do a bit of a recap, as we obviously know. I'm going to double down a bit on neural nets training and where we are on that continuum towards FDA certification. A lot of interest in the shareholder community about that. And so let's try to demystify it. Let's bring you all right up to speed so you can see the goodness that's been happening with Randy, Bruce, and the team at HealthGauge for the last 60 days. They've been making great strides, and I think you'll be quite pleased with what you see there. Finally, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the traction, and I'll speak specifically about the products and the markets that we're currently entering, and a little bit about the markets we're going to continue to expand into as we go through the first half of 2024. And then we'll wrap up, as I said, with some Q&A. So, at the top of the start of all of this, I joined AIML Monday, September 11th, a somewhat ominous date, if you would. But I had made a pretty good, I'll call it a bit of a running curb start. I, entered the picture kind of mid-August, got a little bit familiar with what I was, stepping into, but really didn't activate fully until the 11th of September. And at that time, I use a bit of a playbook. I've done it a number of times in different businesses that I've been involved in. But it really formulates around the following. I wanted to make sure from the get-go that we could recruit a great sales organization. In other words, not just hire business developers, but make sure I could bring in folks that have kind of been there, done that, got the t-shirt, worked alongside me, and understood how we could take kind of nothing and turn it into revenue. And so joining me on that same September 11th date was Andrew Crow, who is our VP of Sales and Growth here at AIML. I also wanted to spend a bunch of time refactoring our tech stack. In other words, really understanding what was real versus what was, I'll just say, promising, but not solid enough for us to sell. And so it's taken the better part of 100 days to do that, but we're there now. And I've got a very strong idea of the product market fit. It's currently being developed and refactored at the moment and brought into the market. And a lot of what we talk about through Q1 will fit into that product market fit. I also really got to understand our value props, based on what it is we currently have to sell and what in the near term we'll be able to sell through Q1. And I made sure that I would adapt the value prop of the business to fit that. I didn't want to make promises and I don't want to forward sell. I basically want to sell what we got on the shelf. And to do that, basically, it required me to get in and really think about a tight go-to-market. In other words, what would I have to do to relaunch the business based on what it is we can sell and sell it directly to personas, buyers who have the need and the want for our product. And so that's all been done through the last 100 days, and it's active. We're actually doing that right now. And as we get towards probably the end of December and into the first part of January, you'll start to see that, tangible format and the concept of websites, sales materials, value props, playbooks, and battle cards, basically, as we're selling. And then, like most things, the best way to do it is to just get your skates on the ice and start going. So we've been running hard from day one. We've been filling the funnel with opportunities. We've got a number of very exciting deals that are coming in through the first quarter. I'll talk a little bit about those, but spend most of next quarter updating you on the progress of those as well. So the short answer there is traction has started. But let's talk a little bit about specific milestones. When I came in and I talked to Tim and the team, about what we would do, I said there's really three things that I want to stay hyper focused on in my first 100 days. The first is I want to be able to ensure that we can book about $1 million in orders as we go into 2024. A lot of these deals were floating around before I showed up, but honestly, we needed to basically come and knuckle down as a team so that we could close them. And so our team at HealthGauge are basically renewing their existing contracts into next year. And, I'll say on a very conservative note, that's roughly about 300 Canadian. And then our friends over in France at Tech to Heal, they did extraordinarily well in the back half of the year, certainly in the last, I'll call it quarter, where we've done well over 500,000 euros in booked orders for 2024. And this consists of a number of really exciting opportunities. None the least is the EssilorLuxottica AR eyewear consortium that they're involved in. That's an extraordinarily exciting opportunity for us here at AIML. They also, as you may or may not be aware of, have developed a number of great distributed clinical trials on the platform Allokine. I'll share a little bit more of that as we go through the presentation today, because I'd like our shareholders to really understand the opportunity that sits in front of us when it comes to distributed clinical trials in our platforms. And of course, they've got a number of exciting licensing and territorial deals in areas like the United Kingdom, France, and even Nigeria, if you can believe it, with their platform. So congrats to them. So I'm very confident that we've established that first milestone of about $1 million in orders for 2024. The second big milestone, and one that I'll talk a little bit deeper about today, is this idea of preparing our neural net and our care pathways for submission to the FDA. This was a big, I'm going to say effort, will be ongoing. I don't see it stopping, but it's very focused. And so we'll bring you up to speed on where we're at in that. But the net of it is we've been very successful in getting our neural net trained to the point where we are ready now to move forward with a form of submission into the FDA. And the Care Pathway Studio at Allokine, almost about, I would say 4 weeks ago, received notification that they too are ready for certification when they want to move forward with that. So that was very positive. And then as early as yesterday, I believe, we announced the closing of just over $750,000 in new capital coming into the business. My third sort of milestone for that first 100 days was to get out and raise about $1 million. So didn't quite hit that target, but frankly, given the conditions that the markets are at, Blake and the team did an amazing job, and we're sitting currently at 750,000+. So congrats to the team for that, and it's been a real privilege and a bit of an honor, frankly, to learn how to work with you guys in real time and hit some pretty significant milestones. So let's move forward a little bit about where we got to through the year or through the first 100 days. For those that have followed some of my presentations in the past, I tend to be somewhat literal, and I try to really simplify what it is businesses do. And when I look at both Allokine and HealthGauge, I feel very confidently that I can summarize their value proposition, certainly their technology, in 3 words: capture, analyze, and action. And, when I basically started selling, in other words, take this value prop out to some early adopters, it really resonated with them. I think anybody that's got an interest in AI and healthcare would essentially understand or very quickly grasp the idea of using the concept of capturing to refer to the smart sensors, these sort of wearable devices that we have that are able to pick up biometric signals or pulses, what I actually refer to internally as our pulse whisperer, because it's an exciting basket of technology that Bruce and his team have produced. It's well beyond just the neural net. It includes the firmware that actually goes onto the device, in this case a watch. It's the SDKs that allow the watch, the app, and the portals to all communicate with each other. And of course, it's the APIs that provide for the connection and connectivity as we're passing data back and forth. So, in sort of collection of that, I call it essentially the pulse whisper. But in truth, the output of that is just some time series data, which gets to be collected. And then we hand that over to the analysis side of the discussion. And this is really where, groups like HealthGauge, well, specifically HealthGauge, they've got a proprietary and patented neural network using machine learning and AI, as we all know. But ultimately, that neural net will take that sort of combination, if you would, of signals, and it will produce a biometric information pulse. It's information, data turned into information that can now be actioned. And what's important about that is that from an actioning point of view, because this is time series data, so in other words, we're not just taking a snapshot. What we're doing is we're taking a group of data over a period of time, we're analyzing it, and we're packaging it to our remote patient monitoring platforms that are able to use things like predictive analysis. This is, fairly intelligent, this is fairly useful machine learning and artificial intelligence to actually glean insights into that data. And why is that important? Because as we've been speaking to rehab centers, to clinics, to research groups, it's all about what they refer to as a data-informed approach to the use of that biometric data. So from a capture, analyze, and action point of view, what really comes out in our value prop is our neural net. And that's why I wanted to speak to that today. Because from a value, from AI/ML's point of view, the neural net is a true, unique piece of software. It is a distinguishing X factor in the context of HealthGauge. And why do I say this? Well, anybody that's been looking at the biometric market knows that sensors, particularly smart sensors, they need neural nets to convert these signals and pulses to more accurate and precise measurements. And, when you study the swell and growth and even the zeitgeist that's out there around biometrics, what you're coming to realize is that people are looking to transform millions and millions of these inputs into actionable insights. And they can do that through our platforms, our innovative biometric platforms. So I'm pretty excited about that. We're going to talk a lot about it over the, quote, next 100 days, which is really Q1 of 2024. But what it does ultimately is it helps to advance our unique value prop, and that's capture, analyze, and action. So who's leading this effort for us? Well, it's Bruce Matichuk, who's the CTO, obviously, of and co-founder of HealthGauge. But it's Bruce and his neural net team. They're doing a great job. And then, of course, Randy Duguay, who's the CEO of HealthGauge. It's he and his team that are actually running the programs that train the neural net. So, one of the big things that I worked on for the first 100 days was really narrowing the focus of Bruce and Randy to accomplish those key outcomes. In other words, Bruce, you and your team work very diligently to get our neural net to the point where programmatically you're confident it can feed submission to the FDA. And Randy, you and your team go and find Bruce enough training data that he can use that to ensure his neural nets are solid. And so what I'm proud to say is that the two of them have worked very well over the last probably 6 to 8 weeks. I've been riding them pretty hard, which I'm sure if anybody speaks to them, they'll attest to it. But the net of it is progress has been significant. So congrats to the team on that. Now, when do we think this thing will be ready? Well, at the moment, the neural net itself, from a coding point of view, is pretty much complete. I would say by the end of this month, we're there. We're just a straw length away from actually hitting all the primary targets for submission. So my feeling is probably towards the end of this month, perhaps maybe the middle of next month, we will certainly be ready for submission to the FDA for the neural net. So that's a big win for our friends at HealthGauge and what they're doing. And so let's talk a little bit about why that's important. So you can see here on this screen that what you're really looking at is on the bottom left, down by the smartphone and the box of the watch, is essentially the handheld view. This would be, quote, the capture aspect of all of this. The neural net will do the it will analyze the data as it comes in, and it will action it through this portal. And what you're seeing on this portal right now, basically, is a screenshot of the ECG. Below it, if you were to scroll down, you would see the PPG. But this is that time series data that's been collected, been analyzed, and then been converted to an information pulse that allows us to see the heart rate at 51, the blood pressure at 106/70, and even the heart rate variability sitting there at about 84. And this is somewhat significant because this is all being done in a non-invasive manner. In other words, we're simply putting the watch on, measuring ourselves for about 45 seconds. And because we've got this rich sampling of biometric signaling, we're able to take it into our neural net and convert it to a very precise measurement through our app and then onto our portal. So that's the primary reason why we're putting the energy behind getting this neural net trained. So this beast of a screen is really what Randy, Bruce, and the team have been using to really double down on getting the neural net trained and certified. So this is, essentially where we sit with the systolic values at the moment. If you look on the left of this, graph, and on the bottom, you've got basically the actual blood pressure. So you take a blood pressure cuff and go through the process of getting your blood pressure measured. And then on the left here, on the y-axis, we've got what the AI reads when we take it through the watch. And the idea here is to get as close to that green line as we can with all our sampling data. Once the neural net is sufficiently trained, more and more of those points will begin to fall into those bands that you're looking at. And so for us as a business, what we want to focus on is getting our actual neural nets trained sufficiently so that we're hitting a couple of different grades that are required for what they refer to as the IEEE 1708 standard. Ultimately, these are the qualification hurdles that we want to get to. And so what I stay focused on is essentially getting to this, less than 5, millimeters of mercury measurement. So essentially getting into the 65% of all the data that we capture fits within that plus or minus 5%. And we're not quite there, but we're getting there. When it comes to the 85% and the 15%, we're extremely close. In fact, within a week or two, we will have hit those marks if we continue. So that's very strong progress. You can see that, as we go forward, we're very close to this. On the diastolic side of the house, we're even closer. And the idea here, again, is to just keep training. The neural nets are tight. They've been programmed. They're doing a great job. Now it's just a function of feeding them with more and more readings. As we go through that process, you'll start to see basically the accuracy coming in a little bit tighter, but for the most part, we're pretty much on plan. And so what this is ultimately telling us is, and I brought this up, I'd asked Randy and Bruce to provide a little bit of a, literally what was last week like versus this week. You can already see here on both systolic and diastolic where we're sitting, and the improvements are incredible. You're seeing it week over week. So we're very confident that over the next few weeks, we will have hit the material threshold that we're looking for. And ultimately, at that point, it's just a function of time before we submit and go through the FDA process. So I'm looking forward to keeping our shareholders updated on that as we go through Q1. But I do want to put a bit of a shout out to the team at HealthGauge to thank them for tackling this, staying on top of it. And, we all know it's important to, the business as a whole. So it's been a big priority, and they've stepped up and basically, driven it home, as they say, which is great. So with that, if I'm to pull back and say, so why do we do that? Well, again, as I mentioned, capture, analyze, and action. So, we've got a great platform with Alakine. It works phenomenally well, particularly from the action side of the house. We know with the capture and analyze, we've got, the HealthGauge platform. We'll talk a lot about, the build out in Q1, which is to really muscle up the HealthGauge platform so that both the app and the portal are really elevated in their capability, because that just broadens our aperture of opportunity into the market. But the neural net is a key piece in all of this. You can't really deliver quality information to be actioned unless you move it through a neural net. And so that, from my perspective, is the X factor of HealthGauge, and what I see as a big opportunity for them as we go through 2024. So with that, let me turn a little bit more around where we're at from a deal point of view, and how we see coming into what I'll call Q1 next year. The first 100 days were interesting. We had what looked like a pretty promising product with our smartwatch, what I refer to as our smart sensor. It needs a little bit of work to get it to the point where we can put it through the quote retail pharmacy model that I'd really like to sort of tackle. I think that is likely a January, February delivery for us, particularly if the team stays focused on getting that neural net trained. So I'll be excited to report back on that. But this is a functioning product, and I am using it in pilot programs currently. We have, as we mentioned, some AI licensing deals in place with HealthGauge. We'll continue to expand those around their neural net. I see beyond blood pressure, our ability to move into heart rate variability and a few other key metrics, because all of the folks we're talking to, from rehabs to clinics, are asking for this from a neural net point of view. Our friends over at Tech to Heal have done phenomenal with clinical trials. We'll share a bit of those in a minute. The EssilorLuxottica AR Eyewear Consortium, again, I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's a significant opportunity for Tech to Heal, as well as obviously the shareholders here at AIML. And then we're looking at working with a number of rehab centers around biometric rehabilitation programs. Again, as we go into the quarter, and I've got more to show you in Q1, we'll be talking up those opportunities because they're quite exciting. And I have made some pretty significant inroads into some biometric research programs that we'll begin to unveil as we probably come into the February timeframe in Q1. Those two are quite exciting. So let me tell you a little bit about some of this distributed clinical trial, that is underway over in Europe. I'm quite proud of the team at Tech to Heal and their platform Allokine for this. This particular one, Aging Well, is in France. If you can believe it, there's over 30,000 participants aged 50 to 70. What France is looking to do, is, and most countries are as well, is looking at graduating its retirement age from 65 to 70. And they really want to understand the societal impacts, particularly to those that, are somewhat, I don't want to say marginalized, but they're not readily able to go to health facilities, healthcare clinics, just given the geography of where they live in. And so they've made great strides. They've got a program in place with the University Hospital of Nice to really look at how they can prevent the loss of autonomy in this cohort as they age. And, it's basically a program running across 10 different labs, very complicated in its measurement and what it's looking to do. The fact that it is distributed, meaning it's going to remote locations, there was really only one platform that could handle that, and that was Allokine. And so they were awarded what amounts to a 5-year program to run it. And so, when I refer to the revenues and the bookings of orders, I'm really only referring to year one of that particular opportunity for them. So congrats to the team on that. Of course, as they've gone in, started to design it, started to put early parts of it into play, they were awarded a second clinical trial on top of that, this one to straddle France and I believe it's Italy together. And through the remote region there, they've got about 1,500 individuals and participants working on that particular program. So, they're already seeing knock-on opportunities from a distributed clinical trial point of view. And, I really love this clinical trial market. It's one that I think here in North America, given the fact that we've got 2 or 3 of these rather robust trials happening in Europe, we're well stanced to bring this here into the United States through one of our subsidiaries at AIML, where we have a joint venture, a 70-30 venture with our friends at Tech to Heal. And, why I like the market is, as you can see here, it's growing very quickly. Clinical trials, they're not the sexiest business in the world. They're not, it's not one of those, businesses that, has got full of excitement, but it's just that steady Freddy singles and doubles all day long. And why? Because AI has just created so much demand for trials. We're even having folks call us and ask, can they do a trial to trial? Which is quite interesting, actually. And where I would like us to sit, certainly through 2024, is down here at the bottom. There's a segment within this rather large growing market called clinical trial management systems. Estimated about $2 billion per annum, growing, as you can see here, to well over $5 billion by, say, 2032. But what I'm most interested in is a subsegment within that called distributed clinical trial management systems. These are the unique platforms that allow clinical trials to happen where the participants, the subjects, are not geographically bound by the region of the trial. And being able to do that in a relatively self-serve model, again, using a lot of our biometric capability from our friends at HealthGauge can really crack open a unique stance within that market. So you'll hear more about this as we go through Q1 and Q2 next year, but that's an area that I believe, for our shareholders is a strong, enduring market. There's nobody really in there, and once we get in, as you can see, there's great growth opportunity in that segment. The final thing I'll talk about on this, I wouldn't say final, but I really do like this idea of the non-invasive blood pressure product. This was something that the team at HealthGauge originated, when they founded the business. They built their neural net tech around this. Tim and the team looked very deeply at this for a variety of use cases. When I study this market, I get actually a little bit giddy about it. I've shared this, I think, in the past, but I just want to emphasize this because this will definitely be a goal and a target that I'm going to shoot for in 2024. If we think about heart disease, and the impact of it, there's 100 million people in the United States right now with heart disease. There's about 1.5 billion people worldwide. In fact, that's probably a low number, but let's just call it 1.5 billion. In the United States, there's about 400,000 people a year, 400,000 deaths actually a year attributed to heart disease. And frankly, inside their healthcare system, there's about $50 billion sloshing around. And so when I look at that as a potential segment, what really strikes me is, and I've kind of put it right here in the middle of the screen, the fact is that blood pressure measurement, regardless of who you talk to, healthcare, clinician, rehab, et cetera, they'll tell you one of the key diagnostics and preventative tools that they have for this is measuring blood pressure. And so when I think about that, and I think about the ability to take our product out into the market, really what I try to do is establish, really goal state. So if I was to think about getting literally 1/20th of 1% of that 100 million person market, that equate to about 50,000 units, frankly, at $249 US for a smartwatch with a smart sensor, all the neural net capability and the remote measurement and monitoring. I think that's a pretty good deal. But more importantly, I think if I can package that up and move it through retail pharmacy, because that's where people go who have heart disease or they have a requirement for their heart disease to be monitored. And so if I can open that segment up and move that product through the market, all of a sudden I've got a bit of a channel now that I can take that retail pharmacy into our app, into our product, and brand it directly into their customer base. Obviously for them, it provides them a bigger share of wallet, a bigger opportunity to stay connected with that particular customer. I mean, frankly, any of us who have heart disease or high blood pressure, it's likely you're checking your blood pressure not once or twice a month, but probably once or twice a day, sometimes several times more. And every time you're doing that, you're using your phone to see essentially where you fit on that. And that's a moment and an opportunity for that pharmacy to connect with that customer. It doesn't have to be a blatant promo code or a sales offer or anything like that, but it could just be an actionable piece of information that adds a little bit of goodwill to their brand back to that customer. So these are areas that we're going to go pretty deep in through the first half of the year. Then obviously, as we come out of our FDA cycle, we'll go super, super fast into it through the second half of the year. So I'm excited with that. Let me wrap up around the opportunities, talking a little bit about this Essilor-Luxottica opportunity. Kudos to Fabrice, to Joffrey and the team at Tech to Heal. They really nailed it. They took their platform and they adapted it so that it could fit into the continuum stack, the technology stack that the team at Essilor-Luxottica were using to allow for the ability to essentially visualize through low-cost, lightweight eyewear, augmented reality holograms. And of course, once you're able to do that, when you start studying its use and its application in places like healthcare, it becomes kind of obvious why it's game-changing. And so within the framework of Allokine, they will be doing on this eyewear the ability of telehealth programs of all types. Patient monitoring, of course, would be a natural. They'll be doing hospital and procedural training. They'll even be looking and speaking to high-performance sporting applications with athletic communities. And of course, the real-time data integration to a lot of other systems that are feeding healthcare and health tech, if you would. So congrats to the guys on that. Probably not something we will see come out through perhaps even the whole of 2024. We may see glimpses into pilots and proofs of concept, but in truth, this is likely a 2025, 2026 type of opportunity. But the fact that we're actually on the field and playing with the people that are involved in this is significant. And for those that aren't aware, EssilorLuxottica is literally the largest eyewear manufacturer in the world, both from a lensing and a framing point of view. So with that, basically, I'd like to sort of conclude by saying, yep, lots of market opportunities for us at AIML. But what I'm most specifically interested in at the moment is really understanding what our technology can do and what we can start selling in January, which is essentially what my next 100 days or what I would consider my Q1 objectives will be. And I look forward to sharing those with you, likely the first, perhaps second week of January when we come back from the holidays. But I think with that, Ashley, if I could, we could open it up to some questions, if there's any, and we can go from there.
We definitely have a few.
All right.
We can start with Charles Gray. He's asked, Paul, who are your competitors that you are aware of? And have you been able to evaluate where they have an advantage, assuming you think you have one?
Okay, well, very good. Number of competitors in a couple of areas. So let's take basically health gauge, biometrics. There is no doubt that Apple, Samsung, Garmin, et cetera, are all interested in biometrics, from watches, wearables to even clothing. What I love about the health gauge platform is that we welcome that level of competition. As a business, our quote X factor, our unique differentiator is our patented and proprietary neural networks. And so the more wearable devices that can propagate the market, the larger that capture aperture is for us. That choke point in the middle is the analysis. So if all the capture data can come in and people can literally do something as simple as a micropayment to hit that analysis and then on from there to their actionable platforms, we're in a great place. And I would love for HealthGauge to become the dominant player within the context of that equilibrium, if you would, capture, analyze, and action. So there is competition from the wearable. On the actionable side of the house, absolutely lots of different platforms that are out there. But the truth of the matter, they too need actionable data. So the sweet spot for us is in that neural net and in the analysis side. On Allokene's side of the house is a digital remote platform. That's a business that, language tends to get thrown around, quite a bit. And, you got to be careful there because what Allokene did is they spent the better part of 3 years building, tearing down, building, we hit it and then run hard. And in January of this year, that's when they hit it and ran hard. After literally 2 years of try, iterate. It is not as simple as people think. There are a lot of regulatory requirements, disparate data islands that need to be pulled together. There's an awful lot of ingenuity that goes into creating a somewhat ubiquitous care pathway program, but more importantly, the ability to access all of the data that is floating around the patient and then pull it into a very homogenized, for lack of a better term, electronic medical record. Some people call them EMRs, some people here in the States call them EHRs. The idea here is that is not a trivial exercise, and our friends at Tech to Heal have been able to do that. So they may sort of sound like their competition, but I can tell you from where they stand and what they've been able to do, they've pretty much got a beachhead there when it comes to remote patient care. So I'm hoping that answers the question or addresses most of it.
Perfect. The next question is from Francesca Bolton. She says, "Hi, Paul. I enjoyed your morning drive last week. It seems you might have the experience needed to turn this company around. Having said that, my question would be, since you've come in, what don't you like about the company and how are you making changes?"
I think right at the top of the session, here's what I'm greatly encouraged about is the following. And the number one, from the board down, I am very well supported. Tim, Blake, and all the other folks that are involved here have been nothing but 110% in my corner from day one. And that is frankly, that's unusual. Most companies, there's always a little bit of turbulence at the top. Here, no, it's been very straight, very direct. They've given me the latitude to do what I like to do, which is get in, really understand what's real and what's not, because there's a lot of these things, as you get into it, what they purport is real is generally, just say not so real. We don't have a lot of that here. What we've really got here is a great group of staff, a great group of founders, a lot of good contractors. And I don't want to say they're lacking leadership, but what we do need is a North Star. And that all starts by driving revenue, finding good quality revenue. I tell these, the teams, there's this idea of good revenue and there's this idea of bad revenue. And it sounds kind of crazy because you think all revenue is good. But when you're early or you're a young company or you're a small business, it's very important that the revenue you bring in is aligned to your growth and your strategy. So you don't go and run and do one-off, opportunities. What you really want to focus on is building consistent singles and doubles to build momentum that stay in a lane. And ultimately, what you really want to be able to do is find repeat business that is very similar, if not identical, to the last deal you did, so that as you're doing it, your margins are improving and they're increasing. Also, the institutional muscle, the knowledge within the company gets better and better and better if it's doing somewhat repetitions around those types of deals. And it doesn't get boring because we're in AI and health tech. So the advancements that are coming out here are substantive. And so you just want your team focused on doing the best they can within that lane. And I think if there's one thing I could comment on is that's really where I found my traction with the team over the first 100 days is what are the folks really good at in their lanes, the proverbial, right seat on the bus, and then, really just running with it from there. What I'm also happy to say is, there's really no business development commercialization capability within the AIML teams before I showed up. And that was part of the reason why I was hired. And so by bringing in the wisdom of the folks that I've worked with before and allowing them to kind of independently run through the different businesses and the teams, kind of brought a really meaningful bit of energy into the organization. I think, if you speak to the folks at HealthGauge, they're somewhat engaged because they can see the light, right? They can see where they've got to go, what they've got to do, and what they've got to hit. And we've got somewhat similar situation with our friends at Tech to Heal. Although as we get into 2024, we'll be taking the Allokeen platform and putting it into here in North America, which I'm excited about because that's going to be a fun process. So I hope that answered the question. Thanks for it.
Okay, Damon Walker, does the company have the option to increase its ownership in Tech to Heal?
It does. We currently sit at about 12.5%. We're up to 25%. I'm certain Fabrice would welcome more if needed. And we've also got a, AIRX Inc., which is our U.S. or Canadian, well, I guess it's a North American subsidiary, best way to put it, where we share a 70-30 split with Tech to Heal for all activities on Allokeen here in North America. So I think we're well positioned with that. And we do believe in time, there's an opportunity to expand our holdings in Tech to Heal in Europe.
That's great. David Hopkins would like to know, how accurate is the HealthGauge blood pressure product?
I'm going to say pretty accurate, getting more accurate by the week. Our goal, frankly, is to come out probably in January with the product at all levels accurate enough for submission to the FDA, software as a medical device. If you go back and look at those slides that I sent, you can see we're very, very close, or plus or minus 5%. And so as you go through the grading system, Randy, who's, working with his team to get the training content, and Bruce, who's got his team on the neural nets, very confident we're going to hit those numbers. So that's a significant breakthrough because anybody that actually does take blood pressure, particularly if they're at home, we call it non-invasive because it actually is. You got the watch, basically you put it on your wrist. you dab a little bit of water on the ECG portion, you hold it, 45 seconds later, you get a blood pressure. And a blood pressure measurement, sorry. And, so it's very good from that perspective. But it does need to get better over the next few weeks. And then what will happen is once we've hit that threshold, obviously we'll make updates to our app, we repost them, and then basically all the existing devices will get advantage of that neural net. So as we go through, let's call it January, absolutely, we'll hit those FDA thresholds.
Awesome. Shaq Bashir would like to know, Tim informed that more than 60 off-patent infringements could be there. What's the status of that?
Good question. I haven't put an awful lot of energy into looking at off-patent infringements in my first 100 days. I don't, it's quite possible, but I don't, hasn't been high on my radar right now to go after patent infringements. Yeah.
Okay, next question. Dan says, hi, Paul. I really like the current non-invasive systolic diastolic data distribution and the chance of further improving counts within 5% accuracy. Regarding blood pressure related market share, I am unsure if placing a percentage, even a small one, as a predictor of revenue. Perhaps there is another way to estimate market share, including milestones of retail outlets and response to online sales efforts. What might AI ML offer that can be a distinction?
Very, very good question. Straight up, my approach is to go into retail pharmacy organizations, typically locations with as few as a dozen to potentially thousands of pharmacy locations, and make our smart sensor blood pressure measurement watch available through that distribution channel. You're absolutely right. Using 100 million market aperture and a rounding error of, assumption to derive a market of 12 to 50 million is not the most accurate. The milestones that we would put in place for that would absolutely be regulated by number of locations, the sales per month per location, the ultimate gross margin made available back to AIML after we've surrendered revenues, top-line revenues to the distribution channel participants, and then, of course, any support and admin costs that would go on top of that. And as we get into that channel and we start to unfold that, I will make that abundantly available to our shareholders because I think that is an exciting story for us to chase. It's a market that I think we've all experienced firsthand, so we can all relate to it. And absolutely putting those kind of numbers and milestone metrics in front of you is something I would do as your CEO. I look forward to that, actually. It's going to be a lot of fun.
That's great. Jordan has asked, were there any unexpected challenges or opportunities that emerged during your first 100 days, and how did you address or leverage them?
I'll just say I've said this before, right? On all caps, yes, there were several surprises, but that's part of the job. Really the best way to address it, any quote obstacle, is to just deal with it head on. What I've come to find is that, and I say this with every single person that is a member of AIML. First of all, their heart is in the right place. Their heads are in the right place. They are 100% focused on adding shareholder value. That's the most important part of it. I think, many of them were spread very thin, which is not uncommon when you've got smaller companies, struggling to hit revenue, certainly revenue break even, which I might add, HealthGauge is at. This is not I'm not looking at HealthGauge as a diminished asset in that respect. I think they've got great opportunity. And, frankly, Randy and Bruce did what they could, given what they were working on. So, no problem on any of that. What I find refreshing, though, is that, we come from a bit of base of strength there. And probably the most alarming thing for me, and not to say alarming in a bad way, but probably the most shocking, is that because they've been building, Bruce and Randy have been building their technology for so long, they got so comfortable with the advancements that they had made with their neural nets that for them, they would say, well, yeah, of course, we got a neural net. It does this, this, and this. And then I would take that out and show it to people that run, for lack of a better term, very sophisticated clinics, rehab clinics, where they're using biometrics in a very targeted and, methodical, scientific way, right? And they'd be like, I can't believe you guys can do this. This is incredible. Like, there's nobody has this kind of stuff. And I would go back to these guys. Like, oh, of course, we use supercomputers. I go, no. You don't understand. The commercial viability of this is pretty huge, right? Like, and I'm not just saying this because I think I've got like actually third-party points, right? People are saying, we'll buy this and we'll bring it into market. So anyway, that was a nice, I'll call it happy surprise. Frustrating so much that, we weren't in there doing that already, but that's fine. We're there now. And as you can see, our neural nets are just training and getting better and better. So I'm very confident that is the right sweet spot for HealthGauge. In fact, I'm very certain as we go through 2024 and we begin to advance out the aperture of what's possible with these neural nets, I think the best days of what Bruce and his team have dreamt up about neural nets will come to see the light of day. There is some very ambitious goals that those folks have. I encourage them to follow those. It's my job to find in the customers and the capital to make that real. But we have got a good team here, and and they're focused on it. So I'm proud of them for that. So yeah, that would probably be about the biggest, I would say, aha. I don't know if that was a good one or a bad one, but that's kind of what I found. Yeah.
This is almost a follow-up question from someone from Zach. He has said, for HealthGauge, are your revenues interlocked with FDA approval?
No, not at all. I would like FDA approval for one reason and one reason only. That $249, which was US, by the way, sales price can now become $749. So once you've secured FDA approval, in this case, it's software as a medical device for that neural net and the blood pressure measurement, you're able now to deliver that product outside of, quote, the information and wellness spectrum and into more of an FDA approved, opportunity. Larger revenue just means larger share of wallet to all participants in that particular channel. But it does not mean that we have to have that in order to pursue or prosecute that particular opportunity. I also feel that the neural nets themselves will become a licensable product that may or may not require FDA approval for that particular use case. In other words, if I'm an app manufacturer, an app producer for the Apple Watch, and I've got this crazy way to track people's activity, and while I'm doing that, I want to be able to pull down a little bit of blood pressure, HRV, and maybe some O2, can I use a neural net for that? So our ability to license in and out of those types of apps becomes quite relevant as well. And I actually see that completely underserviced market, by the way, that HealthGauge can go in and take, and really a top of the hill position on. And it's a beautiful business because it's one of those ones that, it's frankly an e-com company where you're using SEO and SEM and customer acquisition and return on ad spend. And, it's very basic metrics to get the ball moving on that. Basically, if I put $1 into ads, can I get $3 out? That kind of formula. And when you've got frankly, a patented neural net that can handle that, you can do some scale there if you want. So we'll see how that goes. That's all part of Q1's discussion.
Okay, we've got a long one here from John Weeb. He says, hi, Paul. Yesterday's CNN headline news announced that Apple will stop selling their Series 9 watch and Ultra 2 watch due to an ongoing dispute with device maker Masimo, where Apple was in violation of Masimo's pulse oximeter patent, which monitors blood oxygen levels. How do you see this case and these types of cases playing out in a space that HealthGauge lives?
Well, again, patented neural nets is a big one for that same reason. As I talked earlier about, why do the neural nets, right? This whole idea of smart sensors is proliferating. There's a massive demand. And when I say massive, let's just say maybe 1 or 2% of the population is interested in better understanding from a data-informed approach how to manage their own health, which even that is huge, right? So it is not surprising that you're going to be seeing these types of suits going back and forth, in that space. Masimo, we know very well We know their products well. Some of the clinics we work with use their products, ask us constantly if we can share data. Their specific view on O2, may or may not be, Apple may or may not be infringing on that. I'm not quite sure how well that suit will go because, Apple does not really provide an awful lot of signal integrity on their watches. They give you this sort of accurate, they give you a measurement, may or may not be accurate. And most clinicians or healthcare professionals who are studying, people and using biometrics to help in the assistance of their therapy will say the Apple Watch is nice, but it's not really, it's not medical. Whereas Massimo are, they've got some very significant and well validated technology in that space. But I love that particular market because when I see suits like this hit the public mainstream, it means that the market is muscling up. It means that the market zeitgeist is starting to become a lot more, I would say, familiar with Main Street. And that's only good for us. Sounds odd, people suing each other, good for us. But it does help elevate awareness. I'm not particularly concerned that we are in any jeopardy from that perspective. Again, we've got our lane. It's blood pressure measurement, non-invasive. Bruce and his team have got the ability to open up the aperture on that neural net to study more inputs and provide more outputs. But for today, it's all about blood pressure measurement.
That's great. Corey Power said, Paul, what governments do you think are most eager to deal with on the incentive side of things out there in the market?
It's a good question. I'm going to say no governments I've dealt with. It's probably not a fair question, a fair answer. Europe, clearly, if you look at where a lot of opportunities are coming in from our friends at Tech to Heal, much more socialist kind of approach to things. A lot of, quote, government funding available in, either public or public-private kind of partnerships or just, full-on grants into healthcare, primarily just to benefit, the populace. There's, similar kind of here in Canada and the U.S., but, we at our level currently, I don't see, a lot of that. There's no, there are research grants, there's medical activations. I think as we go through the FDA process, we'll come to notice, I know Randy's already talking to a couple of folks, in the Alberta sphere, we'll call it, looking at providing, matching dollars to our FDA process, primarily as a way to, frankly, do it locally, but also keep, I wouldn't say employed, but to provide benefit and inurement back to that local population as we go through that process. So we'll take advantage of those where we can, because they are meaningful, and I do think the net outcomes benefit both parties. I don't see that currently in the States, but that's primarily because we're not active in looking to do that in certain states. I have spoken with a number of folks that want to license and want to sell our products, working in state districts themselves. They are finding some pretty interesting opportunities, but I don't have anything that I can kind of report back to shareholders on that. Perhaps Q1, probably more likely Q2 if it is to happen. But it would be nice if we could we could find our way into some of those programs down south for sure.
Okay, Alfie Haworth, have any strategic investors come into the company since you have come on board?
I would say a few, yeah. Short answer, yes. Yep. Can't tell you who and what the strategy is, because it's still, the strategy is still under, I'll say, we're still discussing. But yeah, there's been a few actually. It's quite good.
Great. Glenn is asking, do you see health gauges NN becoming a backbone which Apple and Samsung, et cetera, would be licensing?
That would be the complete goal. I would love to see Apple and Samsung license. Be fabulous. Probably not likely in its entirety. However, what I do believe will happen is that when you see apps in the App Store, Samsung, Android environment, behind the covers is this wonderful little neural net that has a micropayment tied to it. And that as everybody is taking some form of biometric measurement, they're running through our neural net or neural nets for some small fee per transaction or per measurement. Don't quite know what that looks like, but definitely on the radar to be explored in advance through 2024.
Good. Marco Freeman, how much working capital does the company have?
Well, we're pretty good. We just came out of, our last round, and we'll probably look to continue to advance, capital as we go through the first half of next year. But we're well positioned. These companies are running relatively revenue break even, so nobody's kind of underwater per se. A little bit of carrying overhead, obviously, with some of the new ads of people that we've put in place, but this is nothing that's not manageable. And certainly, we're very, I would say very diligent with our capital, very efficient with our money. So in my perspective, we've got plenty of working capital.
Good. John Weeb, it seems that the NeuroNet might be HealthGauge's secret sauce as a competitive value proposition. Could you elaborate why the NeuroNet is our unique product offering?
Yeah, absolutely. So in short answer is, I don't want to say anybody, but building a mobile app on anything these days is not particularly difficult, nor is building a web portal, whether it's a patient portal, a remote patient monitoring platform, even electronic medical record. I mean, there's some issues about getting the data into the record and the workflow management. But again, these are solvable technology issues. There is no true organization that I know of that literally have a competency built to take in biometric signals from virtually all types of devices and run them through neural nets and convert those signals into actionable information that can then go into another platform. And so from the day I met Randy and Bruce and really studied what was their X factor, it just kept coming back to that neural net. And what's really surprising about the neural net, and this was, just me being somewhat of a novice, is, I refer to a neural net with blood pressure and then a neural net with heart rate variability and maybe one for, frankly, blood glucose. But in truth, it's all one neural net. It's just what you want the neural net to deliver as the output. And so this is really interesting because it allows us to really advance that X factor and open up what it can do as we're going forward. And that is going to be part of the talk track that I'll share with our shareholders as we go through the next 100 days. Yeah.
Great. Robert Bates has asked, does the company have any roadshows booked yet for 2024?
Good question. No, frankly, not right now. Yeah.
That's quick. Michael.
Well, no, I mean, there will be.
Yeah.
I just don't actually. And it depends, is it a commercial roadshow?
Nope, moving on.
Broker roadshow, but no, I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm just saying it's if it's a broker type roadshow, Blake is your guy. And if it's going to be arranged, he and his team will get it done double time and in spades. They did an amazing job through the first 100 days. Almost too good. I would leave the day just hoarse. From a, I'll call it, trade show, market symposium type thing. I can tell you that Bruce and Randy are very avid attendees, if not speakers, at numerous trade shows and conferences, more so than I even kind of like. Hey, where's Randy? Oh, he's at this, at what? But, the truth of it is they're out there, they're mixing it, they're networking. Their feet are on the ground, their ears to the road, and they're listening to what's happening in the market. In fact, I don't know, I think maybe, Ashley, you guys may have shared it. There was a wonderful article came out on Bruce and Randy from a magazine down in the Valley just last week. It was an output of, Randy being down there about 3 weeks ago. So, yeah, I mean, they are good ambassadors for AIML, without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are busy and you have a lot of plans.
Yeah. And we're small. So, it's got to be done in a measured and appropriate way, right? Yeah.
And that would be, to further that question, that would be updated on the website. They'd be able to find all of the company.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Michael Horton has asked, as CEO, what measures have you taken to foster a culture of continuous learning and adaptability within the organization, especially in a field as dynamic as AIML?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So best way for me to answer that is to say that think of AIML as an umbrella company with a, for lack of a better term, private company called HealthGauge, operating principally out of Edmonton, with resources, used internationally, frankly, to develop. And then over in France, we have this, smallish position in a company called Tech to Heal, operated by Fabrice Parkin and Geoffrey Gain. And they too have a cohort of folks, employees basically that work for them. And then at the umbrella level, there's myself, there's Andrew Crow, Mike Currider, obviously Blake, Tim, etc. And what I try to do is make sure that each of these, I'll call them private entities, these operating companies, have essentially enough direction, enough capital, and enough short-term goals to stay very focused on our net outcomes, which is obviously to increase our share price. And how do we do that? Well, we need more customers, we need more revenue, and we've got to start showing cash. And so I keep us very focused on that. And that is one incremental step after another, week over week. It's not super fancy. There's not these great big aha moments. Frankly, it can get kind of boring. But the truth of it is, it's just hitting singles and doubles week over week. And, oftentimes what I find is when you provide that level of clarity to, folks that are in disparate groups, but they're operating somewhat in their own little silo, they get to see the bigger picture and, they get to identify with it. But if I could say there's a learning moment, for them, it's giving them the validation of when it's working and not working and why. And, that's been a big part of the first 100 days for me. And, I'm proud to see it. I mean, I can see it in the way the team has really grappled with training this neural net. That's not an easy thing to do, right? I mean, you got to run around and convince people to take a blood pressure cuff measurement and then a watch measurement. Oh, and then do that again. It is not trivial, right? I mean, it's not difficult, but it's a slog. And so Randy and the team have, they've taken that on. And then Bruce at the same time has to, then take that data, have his guys crunch, and work on the net. And somebody's got to run over to University of Alberta, play with their little supercomputer, get the data down, say, it's a process. And so my goal for them is to just give them measurable milestones that they themselves can be successful at, and then build upon that. And that's what these guys have been doing. And I think what's exciting and why I've been very vocal about trying to keep this transparent to our shareholders is I want our shareholders to come along for that ride. I want them to see the incremental build that we do week over week, month over month, quarter over quarter. That's why I'm big on these 100-day, they're really quarterly milestones. Here's what we said we would do. Here's what we hit, some good, some bad, but basically, nobody dogged it. And when we do run into blockages and we do run into obstacles, oftentimes I reach out to shareholders and I say, here's the problem we're facing. Anybody out there know a guy who knows a guy or can help us out or is willing to consider? We're always open to problem solving and working with shareholders, because in the end, we're all part of the same team here. I may lead it directly as the CEO, and we may have some great operating companies, but everybody is part of this team. And anything any of us can do to help move us all forward collectively, I'm all for it. All for it.
That's great. Ethan Briggs, how do you see AI/ML innovations contributing to the broader ecosystem of startups? And what role do you think the company plays in supporting innovation and entrepreneurship in the AI/ML space?
That's a good question, right? I think part of the reason I was intrigued by AI/ML, even though it's a little bit of a smaller, small cap company, was the opportunity to come in and work with businesses like HealthGauge and Tech to Heal. And there are several others that we've identified and are speaking to that are at that point where they're about a straw length underwater from either breaking through with commercialization, hitting that revenue break even, or frankly just coming out of an engineering phase, but they're ready to sell. They just don't know how to do it. They need a guy who can do that. And so AI/ML is really well positioned for that. And it's not just because of me, it's because of the team that we're building to commercialize around. Because the mistake most folks make is they think that, and startups are notorious for this, they'll begin with a great idea, a lot of energy, caution into the wind, and you get a couple of really interesting early starts or proof of life around the technology. But it's a big leap to get that into something that you can begin to sell, to commercialize, and then to scale. And then ultimately, as you're scaling, if you wish, an exit. And so, that is what I think we will be able to do with AI/ML. It will take us a year or two to get to the point where we've muscled that pipeline up. But when we get there, we're going to be very well positioned for it. Because we have the institutional and the intellectual knowledge to do that. We've all done it before. We've got some core assets that we're currently doing it too. And I believe our shareholders will come to see over the next 2, 3, 4 quarters the success that we will reap as a result of that. So I think we will, in time, play a very formative part in helping to stimulate that startup and entrepreneurial ecosystem around healthcare. Because I can tell you, just being in healthcare now, it is needed. I think we could all attest that improvements within the context of healthcare would be a benefit to us all, without a doubt.
Okay. Williams asks, how do you like running a public company so far, Paul?
Well, I've run a couple of them. They have their good days and their bad. There's always, the interesting part about it is there's always this, how do I say it? There's two sides of the boat, and you got to be careful here, because sometimes you can run over to this side of the boat and it tilts this way because you spend too much time on the operations or the go-to-market or the, one particular, and then you got to run over here and I forgot this part. And so the secret is to find a great team that you can work with who can handle all of it, so it's a fairly level process and you can move forward, so that my attention can be focused on sort of the here and now, but then out from month 8 to month 12. Where am I at 2, 3 quarters out? And so I try to build that into the DNA of the business as it's going. And so that doesn't happen in 100 days. That's 12 months. But the good news is all the key pieces are here. There's a few additional headcount that I would like to add at the AMI level as we do begin to scale. But those are early. It's too early for that. That's a Q2, Q3 kind of activity for me. But for now, I enjoy it, I guess, to answer your question. There are a few gaps that we'll need to fill as we go forward. All companies have them as they scale and, swell in size. But the good news is the resources to fill those, I've got, my Rolodex is pretty substantial. So finding them won't be a problem. Yeah.
Okay, and our final question comes from Callum Skinner. For a potential new shareholder, how early do you think I would be into this story?
Beginning of the beginning, we're about ready to go, right? So, I think as a new shareholder, and that's not to diminish what's happened in the past, obviously. But, much of what you'll hear in my talk tracks kind of into 2024, you'll hear this, Ashley, when we're back up for the, what does Q1's milestones look like? And maybe this is a good way to say this, because if it was the last question, I am a big believer that artificial intelligence, predictive analytics, machine learning, neural nets, transformers, general transformers, large language models, etc. There's been a significant reset in capability over the last 12 months. I don't want to say everything is basically at zero and starting over again, but your ability as a new entrant in this market and your ability to make substantive strides in a market segment as a direct result of your opportunity, as a direct result of your ability as a company to utilize those technologies in the advancement of your product and its product market fit, in other words, its value to the payer, has never been bigger. Never. I mean, I have been commercializing companies. I've built and sold several of them, and over the last 30 years. And this current window that we are in is vintage, because AI, ML, and those technologies applied properly in the specific segments of the market that we're operating in can provide enormous benefit very quickly. I mean, within 12 to 24 months. And that's why I'm very interested and excited, very bullish, if you would, on AI ML, because we happen to have a couple of great ones. I mean, we've got a great X factor in our Care Pathway studio at Tech to Heal. We don't talk a lot about that. I'm happy to show more folks about it, but it's a great product. And then we've got this neural net capability within HealthGauge that is just starting to see the light of day. And both of those represent significant opportunities in healthcare. And they wouldn't have existed 12, 24 months ago. So it is the beginning of the beginning for those. And, I welcome all shareholders to follow us, as we go forward into the journey. I jokingly say to our friends, Ashley and Carl at Follow the Money, think of it as a reality TV show that we're building the plane as it's taking off. You'll see the good and the bad. And frankly, I think you'll enjoy the ride. But if you're a new shareholder, enjoy it. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I look forward to you helping us out as we grow. So how's that? Yeah.
That's great. And I guess we can leave things off there. That'll be
Wonderful.
You can wrap up if you'd like, or say goodbye, let people know where they can find you or how they can get a hold of you if they want to email.
Yeah, sure, Ashley. Thanks. Well, as I began with, I'll thank our shareholders, your patience, and your interest in our business. And I said we're always open to speak with you. Oftentimes we reach out to our shareholders because we feel you're our strongest ambassadors. And everybody needs help in healthcare, which is interesting, and a place that I think we can all play a big part in. To the staff, thank you for all your efforts. Looking forward to the next 100 days. I think it's going to be exciting. But I'll leave it at this, Ashley. Anybody can find us on our website. I mean, I'm sure you've got the names here. But I wish everybody all of you online now, to you and your families, have a wonderful holiday season, a safe holiday season. Hope 2024 is a phenomenal year for you. I'm excited about it here at AIML. And I want to thank everybody for those that have hung out with us all the way up to, I guess it's 8:10 now, and indulging me to talk to you tonight. So with that, Ashley, I think we can wrap, and looking forward to everybody having a great holiday and just running as fast as we can in January.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Paul.
Thank you.
Take care.